Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. Welcome to the Planning Board meeting of November 10th, 2022. First on the map for a public hearing is Victoria Bryan Engineer, 6 Pheasant Place. Mike?
This is on for public hearing. I have no comments.
Rich?
Mr. Chairman, I spoke with the engineer, not this gentleman here today, but Jeremy Renato. They did not respond to any of the comments from the 1018 memo, but after speaking with him today, they understand what is needed to complete it, and they will have it completed prior to the next meeting and have it ready for the town board, planning board, sorry.
And Pat?
No issues on this, Mr. Chairman. This is a small grading application.
Anyone from the public wish to be heard? In that case, do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
So as long as you have the information that Rich mentioned that you will have,
Yep.
we'll proceed. Without that, obviously, we won't.
All right, sounds good. Yes, I was copied on that email with Jeremy, and we are fully understand what needs to be done for the next meeting.
Pat, you'll prepare a resolution?
Yes, sir.
And I'll advise the board when the information comes in and that is complete.
Great.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rich. Thanks, Pat. Thank you. Next on the agenda is Western Bluff Subdivision, 350 West Shore Drive. Mike, I don't believe you had any comments, right?
I do not. This is an extension of approval.
Yep, and Rich?
Yes, there's no objection to granting preliminary subdivision extension. There's no changes to the sites being made. They should be aware of the requirements. The board should be aware that are in the May 12, 2022 Planning Board Resolution 2209 still need to be met.
And Pat?
No objection, Mr. Chairman, and you have correspondence from the applicant's engineer indicating that they are still working with the health department to address the final issues.
You need to use the microphone. Introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, Dom Santucci, Santucci Construction. I'm the builder, representing Tom Kling. We're just waiting to get through the health department. That's the only thing that's holding us up.
Now, Rich, you mentioned there were a couple items the applicant still owes you.
No, not me. It's what's in the resolution. So it's information,
Oh.
so I guess it's performance bond, it's all that kind of
Okay.
fun stuff that
I
still
believe
needs
there's
to be
some
provided.
easements that have to be drawn up, and so that's got to
Okay.
be all get done.
Do you have a feel for how close you are to this, or?
I can't answer that because the engineers couldn't make it today. That's why I came. But John, they're working on it every day. It's got to be close.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions from the board?
Okay. I'll make a motion to grant the extension of the preliminary subdivision approval for 6 months.
Second.
That should be plenty.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Third on the agenda is Downtown Mayapack Properties, 559 Route 6, amendment to the resolution. I don't believe there's any comments. Pat, would you like to take us through this a little bit, please?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. So this is an amendment to the original approval that we adopted almost 2 years ago, I think. And if you remember, part of that approval was contingent upon DOT improvements. The DOT has modified their opinion with respect to those improvements. They've been eliminated from the plan, and as a result, that requirement's no longer necessary as a condition of approval, and the bond and inspection fee have been reduced accordingly as a result of that. So it's a new resolution that has those two conditions modified.
So it's actually a new resolution to lower the
It's a new
bond.
resolution. It will be dated today, and now it's another 1 year from today.
Vicki, can you read that in?
Make a motion to adopt the amended site plan resolution?
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. This is actually a good story for Joel, John, Dave, Eileen. We all met out at this property, and the state actually, met out this property a month or so ago. And there was some housekeeping that needed to be done, one of them being a dilapidated bus stop. I mean, plexiglass broken, just, you'd be better off standing out in the rain than standing in that. Thanks to John, the bus stop is gone. I asked David and Eileen to clean up the property, all new mailboxes are there. Looks a lot nicer. We're not done with it yet, right? But it's a lot nicer just simply by going and asking, right? So, thank you, everybody, for that. Next on the agenda is Liberty New York Water, 23 MacArthur Drive, amendment to the resolution. Is anyone here from Liberty New York Water?
No, Mr. Chairman, we told them they didn't have to be here. So the prior resolution included our standard condition that relates to stormwater management plans. In this case, there are no stormwater management improvements associated with the project. So it shouldn't have been a condition originally. They noticed it after it was adopted and said, can you please remove that? It's a simple request, and there are no stormwater management improvements, if you remember, on this application. So the resolution is simply eliminating those standard conditions.
I make a motion to adopt the site plan resolution.
Second?
Bob seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Boy, we're moving right along here. Because Joel's not here. G&F subdivision, lots 5, 6, and 7, 2054 Route 6, extension of resolution. No comments, I don't believe, from Mike, Pat, or Rich. Pat, again, this is for a 6-month extension. Pat or Joe, do you want to explain this?
This is just a ministerial issue that we want to do it retroactive to the August 23rd, 2022 date because the map was filed, the map was signed too late, right?
The map was signed a few days after the expiration of the prior approval, just as an administrative issue. It was a snafu. So what we would do is, what we're doing tonight is granting the extension back to the original approval date, so it would have covered the few days when the map was signed.
Yep. Strictly housekeeping.
Okay. Any questions from anybody on the board here?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to grant an extension of resolution retroacted to August 23rd, 2022 for 6 months.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
And we learned a new word that Joe can explain to all of us.
Non-pro-tunc.
How do you spell that, Joe?
It's in the agenda.
You notice I didn't read that when I did. It's right here, I didn't read that. Okay, Rose distributed the minutes of September 28th, 2002. Bob, I believe you had some edits.
Yeah, they were minor comments. I moved the approval of the minutes subject to those comments.
I make a motion to approve the minutes, subject to the comments.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. No. As you know, we're gonna, I was expecting like a Thursday night football game with Chicago Bears playing, and Mike asking to leave, but, so, next on the agenda, as you know, we're gonna have a little work session here on the comprehensive master plan. Pat, you're gonna facilitate first?
Yep, so a couple things, Mr. Chairman. So earlier today, I distributed a summary of the comments that we've been talking about in the prior meetings. So that's going to be your work product that's transmitted to the town board. So take a look at it. It's my interpretation of your comments, so make sure I've got them accurately reflected, the tone is correct. It's really, up to you to sort of take a look at that and make sure you're comfortable with that. So there's 2 more pieces. So that was reviewing the goals and objectives of the plan, right? We had a lot of comments, and they are, I think I've covered all the bases on the issues we talked about. So there's 2 more things the town board has asked us to look at. Number 1 is the actual zoning map modification. So tonight, if we can all come around the table maybe, and we'll roll out the maps and look at them, and just roll up our sleeves for a while and look at those boundaries. So we have the old map, the existing map, and the proposed map, so we can compare and contrast. The last piece of the puzzle that the town board referred to us was the actual zoning code itself. So that's something that between tonight and our special meeting on the 29th or 30th, I forget the date, Craig, if we want to have that
30th,
meeting.
the 30th, I didn't want to have that. We need a meeting just on that.
So that's, how do you want to handle that? So we can have a page turn at that meeting and go through the code. A lot of the code is technical stuff, so I don't know that you need to get into it. Would you like me to review it first and give you some notes to facilitate that meeting, or do you want to just dive into it and turn it, go through it page by page?
I think from although I'm hesitant to say, I think we should turn through and go page by page.
I think it's
because
worth doing it.
It's important.
I agree.
It's gonna be a lot of work, a lot more work than if you just summarize it, but we're not gonna learn it unless we go through
I
it
think it's a
page
good,
by
it's,
page.
it may take a little time, but I
Yeah,
think it's worth
that's
it. If we're
fine.
devoting a night to it, we probably can get through it.
I'm curious whether we'll be able to do the whole thing in one night.
Depends, right? So,
You know, for example, the waterfront stuff is heavily laden with public comments.
well, remember, Bob,
and-
so what I think it's
Let me just
important.
finish, let me just finish.
Go ahead, sorry.
And while I know we are trying to hit things on a high level, I don't think that is something we can do there. I think we're going to have to drill down and look at some of the wording in light of the comments that have been made.
I'd agree, but remember, it's not your job to resolve the
No,
issues.
but we
It's
can
to
point them
raise the
out.
issues.
I understand.
Yeah, but you're right. That's
Okay.
where the rubber hits the road, frankly.
Hey, Pat, real quick, so the document you sent us today,
Yep,
first of all, thank you, you did a great job. I was comparing it with my notes from the meetings,
yep.
and I just have a couple of little things. You want me to just shoot you an email?
Whatever is easier. So I didn't expect everybody to go through it today, so whatever's easy for, if you want to mark up that version and give it to me, that's fine.
I'll shoot you an email, it's a couple, like 3 or 4 minor things.
If you want to do it by a phone call, just so everybody else.
Yeah,
Mark
I'll
it up,
copy everybody in the
email it.
email.
If you want to do a phone call, that's fine too. Whatever is convenient for you to relay your comments back to me.
Okay.
It's fine. So again, I think we want to look at the map, so it's probably going to be easier if we just come down around, yeah.
We need the microphone.
Hey, Pat, is it the same map that we? Well, that's one is.
We need some cell phones or something. You guys are looking at it right side up.
You know, we would have had a record meeting tonight. We would have had a record time meeting tonight.
This is the zoning that was in place before the update.
86, 04, 2, and then
So what did you say, 86?
82, it says it by your finger over there.
Oh, it's 82.
Two.
Okay.
I just wanted its context. And that's why I think this whole conversation is very important for us to have. These are the proposed zones.
My brother, you have to.
If your one's up, please.
Adam said no.
Yeah, right, exactly right.
I love that look. I love that look, so I'll sit with my real friends.
So I wanted, to start where we were. So this was the zoning that was in place for decades prior to the upzoning that occurred in the early 2000s. So I just want you to take a look at what existed at the time. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 single-family residential zones in the town. The interesting thing about those residential zones were, if you see, it's R60/40, R40/30. What that meant is if you didn't have sewer, you were at the larger zoning district. If you had sewer or water, you got the higher density. It was built into the zoning.
So, I'm sorry.
So
R sixty compared to R.
so R60 is straight. The next zone, R60/40. So if you're in the R60/40 zone, which is this yellow color,
Yeah.
you had to have a 60,000 square foot parcel if you didn't have sewer or water. If you did, you were down to a 40,000 square foot parcel.
Sewer and water, excuse me.
Sewer and water.
So if you did not, you went down to.
No.
No,
No,
if you did,
you
you
did.
did.
So
Okay.
if you have sewer,
So-
it's a density bonus.
So
effectively.
R 4010 was if you had 40,000 square feet, if you had sewer and water,
Right?
that was okay.
You could go down to 10,000.
If you go down to 10.
You go to a quarter
I got
acre,
it. I got it.
if you have sewer and water, you have a full acre if you're
Got it.
well or septic.
So that just
I
to give
got
you
it.
context,
Got it. Yeah.
that's a 4-time density bonus to have.
It's 40,000 square foot's an acre,
Yep.
so if you don't have sewer and water, you need 40.
You need the
All of your full acre, if you've got sewer and water, you're
Okay.
down to 10,000 square foot.
And that's when I first started, this is what was in effect.
Okay.
So just to give you context of what we're dealing with, why we're dealing with this now. So all of those residential districts, 3 multifamily districts, 2 commercial districts, and an industrial district. Those were the zoning districts that existed for decades. We go to 2002, we're effectively left with 2 zones. We went from all of those zones to 2 zones, a commercial zone and a residential zone. We also had the CNR business park zone, so it was really 3, but that was only one very small area. You can see the difference, all the different zones. This was done to prevent development from occurring in the town. It was an upzoning, and the town at the time said, we don't want any more development in our community.
So you took industrial right off the chart.
So industrial, gone. We had commercial business
Commerce
park,
Business Park became the light industrial zone.
that was the only thing.
So
And
that became what was industrial.
That's right.
That's right. You can see the gray area, that was the industrial area, so it kind of corresponds, but not closely.
Basically the same permitted uses, excuse me, I'm sorry
Same
to keep
permitted,
jumping in
basically
there.
the same. permitted.
Basically the same permitted uses, just a better label for it in the town's view.
But again, it's so important to see all of the diversity of zoning that was allowed at the time, to basically 2 zones, a red zone and a beige zone. That was it. And that's what we've been dealing with up till now.
So, just a question, so, under the new, when this was new,
Yep.
if I had something, this is 3 acre?
Yeah,
So if I had something that was,
you're out of luck.
well, if I,
Unless it was approved.
no, if I had an improved lot.
But you've had improved lot that
Then I
existed,
had a
pre-existing non-conforming.
Pre-existing non-conforming.
That's correct.
So probably a lot of that legacy is embedded in what we have.
All non-conforming, you can see.
But not
that.
pre-existing non-conforming, legal non-conforming, because they're approved subdivisions, and I'm sorry to keep correcting.
So I didn't have to build anything, I just had to have the.
If it's on a subdivision lot map, it's an approved lot, you keep it forever, it's, you don't take it away.
Yeah.
But if you had a 1 acre piece next to all of this, and it was not on the lot, and it went up to 3, you lose it. Fair?
Use the
You
opportunity.
lose the ability to build on it without variance.
Yeah.
And if you had 3 acres where you thought you were gonna get 3 lots, now you get possibly 1.
Do we know how, what the volume of zoning there is?
Up to this point, you've been dealing with them, lots and lots of them. There's no question about it. But again, this was context to give you the change. So diverse, normal community with lots of zoning districts, we we changed everything, and then the signal to the community was, we don't want any development in our community. That's what this said to everything, and we've been dealing with that legacy ever since. Every application that comes to us that's something a little bit different, needs variances, needs use variances, they have to go to the zoning board, they're not conforming in certain ways. And more importantly, as I tried to reflect in our comments back to the town board with respect to the comp plan, there's a message embedded in our zoning. When a developer comes to our community, when some investor is looking in our community, and they used to see this, and now they only see this, like, why am I coming? I'm going to Somers, I'm going to Southeast, I'm going somewhere else. It's not, this clearly sends a message to the community. So, to the credit of our consultants, we are now back to a situation where there are a number of zoning districts. So, in theory, that's a very good thing, right? So we're now creating more diversity in our zones. We've gone back to multiple zones. And what we should do tonight is talk about that. So I'm glad Michael is here with respect to this as well. So there's two things to talk about. First is this array of different zones and the uses that are permitted in them. And the second is how you do boundaries. Why is something here as opposed to there? Why did the line stop in certain areas as opposed to other areas? So this is from our consultant. Yep. And I don't know, and I'm pretty sure during the public input stage of the comprehensive plan process 3 years ago, or whenever that was, the community didn't sit around that and draw zoning district boundary lines. I think this came out of Bonnie's interpretation of that input. So it's critical for us to look at this carefully and provide our input back to the town board and I think to Bonnie as well. So I don't know if you want to go through the uses first or look at the map first. I get it. It's better to hear. So one of the, one of the things that I found troubling in the creation of the new districts is just the nomenclature, the names that they've used. So OSR is open space residential. It ain't open space here, it's our 3-acre zone. We don't call this open space, it's our developmental 3-acre zone. So why is open space used as the descriptor for this zoning district?
Open space for our code, has always been, if you do a cluster, the space that's left behind is the open space, correct?
And the other thing about our code is we've always had conservation zones and DEP's land that's been separately zoned. To my ear, that's open space. We can't build anything. It's open space to be preserved and forever protected. It existed here, it exists here in those limited areas, the green areas. And we have it in the new zone, the new code as well. There's New York City watershed lands, there's New York City memorandum of agreement on open space lands. So I'm confused. Why are you calling this open space?
Why is it residential 3-acre?
So,
Or I guess another question, at least that I have, is I think recognizing that this, in hindsight, is the wrong way to go, why are we devoting so much to the OSR district? I mean, there's no change then in a large part of the.
It's actually negative change.
So,
Back to what I said last week or 2 weeks ago when I was talking about now your 3-acre lot, if it has a wetland or a steep slope or anything that is a, what's the word?
an environmental constraint.
You now subtract that out. So if you had a 3-acre lot, now it could need to be 3.5 or 4 acres. So it's actually going in the wrong direction.
and that doesn't make sense to me, because in other words, if you're saying, you need that space, why are you taking, you can't build something there, so it should be calculated in and not subtracted.
At least in the 3-acre one.
So just taking that comment you referred to, you made the point. So we've got a mix of 3 acres, it's all 3 acres now.
Yep, we have
But it used to be 1 acre. Should it be divided up to recognize which of the 1 acre areas and which are 3 acres?
So that's done. So they've done,
Well,
this is the existing.
no, this is not. This is all open space.
And then NR is the next zoning done.
No, we're looking at this.
Oh, right, also.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is all obviously 1 acre. Should this?
All 3.
No, that's 3.
That all remains.
No,
the
no,
same.
what I'm
It
saying.
was built as 1 acre.
It was legacy.
Yep,
1
as
acre.
1 acre.
Back then.
Why are we calling it 3 acre when
Why?
in fact it's 1 acre?
Exactly.
Where I had to actually write a section of code about 9 years ago that said, on an existing lot with an existing house, okay, so you're on an approved lot, the setbacks for a shed should not be 40-40. Because if you're in Secor, if you're in Lake Baldwin, you're in Raymond Hill, the lot's only 40 feet wide. So if you need a 20-foot setback, there's nowhere to put a
So,
shed.
let me give you an example of why it would be useful. So, mixed in here, I have to assume there are some number of lots that are not developable based on the O2 formula.
Absolutely.
And so they're vacant lots, and unless they can combine or whatever, so you would free these up, these extra 1 acre lots for development.
So, not necessarily. So the pre-existing, legally, pre-existing
Remember
non-conforming.
what I said? It wasn't in the
Subdivision.
It's those that I'm referring to.
Okay, so yes, then the answer to that
Parcels,
is
not
yes.
lots.
Yeah.
Lots are subdivision lots.
Okay,
Parcels are
so
parcels.
you-
No, I'm just
No,
explaining so that
that's
you
exactly
understand.
right. That's the point well
So you're
taken.
saying parcels of land that are out there lying, which are under 3 acres,
Right.
could now be opened up to be built on because they're sitting there.
And they're in a.
3
higher
acre
density
zone.
Well, no, they're in a higher density zone now, so doesn't seem to
You
be.
can't do anything.
It doesn't seem to be a negative change to the community. It's not as
Correct.
if you're taking something that's 3 acres in open space and all of a sudden you're putting high density. You've got a high density.
It's already there.
Yeah.
That's
You know,
okay.
and another thought, so with this one, and you explained it quite well, and I really never understood it when you explained it. So there were instances where if there was town water and town sewer, you could have less than an acre.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the overarching theme coming from that is, hey, look, we need to have more housing, more affordable housing, more diverse housing.
Yep.
Well, what's not more affordable, more diverse than having lots that are half acre or something, you know, I'm just throwing it out there.
That's exactly right. So they have created, so now OSR is 3 acres, NR is 1 acre.
Right.
So again, nomenclature bothers me again with this, NR is neighborhood residential. And then we have,
That's,
Excuse me, yes,
yeah, right.
So,
High density residential, medium density residential, low density
why
residential.
don't
It's
we-
as simple as that.
why don't we, yes, we should do that now, put it in there.
So the names just were confusing, I didn't get them. And again, we have, I'll keep saying it, we have a marketing issue in this community. Come here. Why are you gonna come here? We need people to create investment in this community. All this is disincentive, so we need to create incentives. If it's just a confusing title, that's a disincentive. Forget about the zoning, forget about.
Being east of Hudson is enough of a disincentive that you don't need more disincentive, more strikes against you when people are trying to come here. We already got the big strike.
No,
Yeah.
East of Hudson is a big hurdle for these guys to all jump, so.
exactly right. So Mike's point, everything we're talking about hinges on Mike's point about the deduction of environmental constraints. So right now, we don't have that. You do that on a case-by-case basis. What Bonnie is suggesting is it's codified. So you lose the development potential of your property by virtue of the code. If there's a wetland, steep slope, all of those environmental constraints. That's a, as Joe can call it, it's a regulatory taking in some way. If I had a little property that had those things on it, and you said they're deducted all, fine, pay me for that. Yeah, I just lost 5 lots on a
Yeah.
10 acre parcel.
Yeah.
So there's a significant legal issue associated with it. There's ways to do that correctly. I don't see it yet, but they're not finished with the process, so let's give them.
I think we should simplify it, I mean, OSR.
I have to work with this.
Yeah, so, if you
Yeah.
I'm just being straight, I have to work with this. This is something that, the easier it is when somebody makes a phone call to tell them how to develop their land, the easier it is. You know what I
And
mean?
you're gonna lose them right when you say, well, you're in an OSR zone within Carmel.
Yeah.
I bought a house in the neighborhood, what do you mean OSR?
So OSR is easy to deal with.
Just around these tiny-
So that's the next one. Go ahead, Bob.
so I just want to make the point again. It looks like to the eye, there is a fair amount of 1 acre stuff happening.
In a 3 acres.
3 acres.
And less, yeah.
And so if you were to take a marking pen, you would have a hodgepodge
things that would govern my thoughts on proposing those lines. Number one would be the provision of sewer and water. So Craig had the sewer and water map circulated today that you might have seen, which shows how incredibly limited the areas are that support, that have available sewer and water. And they don't correspond to these boundaries. They overlap in certain areas, but that wasn't why these boundaries were created. If you took Bob's suggestion, let's look at the pre-existing smaller 1 acre lots in the 3 acre zone. They're not hitting all of those. There's plenty of areas that are still 1 acre zoned in the 3 acre zoning district. So that wasn't the basis for creating the boundaries. So I'm not sure why the boundaries were created the way they are. I can't find the logic behind a lot of these yellow lines.
I wish we could actually superimpose
That's-
this over this, just to see how it lines up. Because obviously, and I'm sorry to keep jumping in, Secor, Baldwin, up by Raymond Hill and Carmel, these areas are 1/4 acre lots, 1/4 of an acre, or smaller, some in Secor, 40 by 100, 4,000 square feet they have lots in Secor, but they have sewer and water. So there's no septic needed there. So to put them in a 3 acre zone back in the day,
Vicky had a question.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna, you mentioned Bonnie put this together,
Yeah.
we're questioning how did the boundaries come about? What did she base this on?
That's the question. So all I think we need to do is the commentary back to them. How did they come
Question,
about
how,
this?
what was the criteria?
Should there have been an overlay? There should have been an overlay. So if you just look, they got some of this in there, but not others in there. Yeah, so they didn't follow this, they didn't go back to the prior classifications, they didn't follow, boundaries. So I don't know, That's why.
You mentioned the sewer, Mike, I thought you had a valid point, which is confirmation. I think most of us know, all of us know, the confirmation of, hey, just because you have sewer and water doesn't mean you can build on it. And the example of that might be the hotel, right? They have a water district there, but there's no
capacity is the
capacity.
question, correct.
So, but it's still nice for us to know, I think, that
That's what I wanted everybody to be aware of. I wasn't trying to throw a wrench. I
Right.
wanted everybody to be aware.
But if,
You're in a district doesn't mean you have
If I
capacity.
if I hadn't built, I'm talking about house, not commercial. If I'm one of these people who run I've got a non-productive parcel. It's less than an acre. And I have sewer and water. As of right, do I get to develop it?
No.
Or do I have to deal with the capacity issues as well?
So it's still the zoning district boundary that governs the lots.
No,
Sewer.
assuming this.
Oh, sewer?
Yeah.
Different story. So you still have to prove capacity.
Rich should have, Rich, I believe, considered the residential lot out there to be a lot that you.
That's exactly right.
Considered into his calculation, I believe.
So
But-
that's the important thing to bear in mind. We have a sewer study that was based on the existing zoning, which went to every subdivided lot and said 200 gallons per flush, or whatever it was. It went to every commercial property and calculated it. So when, if you remember the boutique hotel, Rich said they're using up all our capacity. That's because it's been calculated for every lot in all of those districts. So we know the numbers. We have the metrics to make that
So is there
evaluation.
anything that we've discussed so far, for example, if we were to stretch out the yellow boundaries into some of these other areas, would any of that run afoul of this?
So it will, because some of them, so for example, expanding those boundaries probably goes beyond sewer and water districts, which is why the old concept of a 40 acre, 10 acre zone is somewhat logical.
Yeah,
We kind of had it right for a while.
Yeah, 1 acre, quarter.
Yeah.
You could do whatever you needed to do as long as you had to.
That's exactly right, and there's still capacity. So God bless you, sewer and water, go for it.
Yeah.
If you don't, now you've got a limited situation. That's a self-limiting factor as opposed to deducting wetlands and steep slopes, which is a punitive factor. I mean, I get it, the theory behind that is logical, but you do that on a case-by-case basis. I don't need it. Maybe that's something we'd recommend gets revisited 5 years after the adoption of the comprehensive plan. If everything goes perfectly and all of a sudden people are investing in the community, we need to get the brakes a bit, good provision, but we need to hit the accelerator, not the brakes. So again, it's one of those provisions that seems counterproductive.
So I think we're all agreeing on this OSR, right? The
So-
change that and that. Now,
And then there's this is the high-density residential zone.
And just for clarity, high density is the smaller lot.
Yep.
Just want to make sure everybody's,
so,
low density means bigger lot.
So right only exists as a senior housing project, it's Pulte. That's the only thing we have. Pulte's legacy is mixed in this community. Some people think it's good, you know, you've dealt with some of the bad associated with Pulte. So, just utilizing the name senior housing is no different than multifamily housing, it's multifamily housing, that's all it is. So why call out the name that has a negative connotation associated with it?
Especially since it's not allowed anywhere but where it already is.
So,
They only delineated what's there, correct? I mean, there's no
I think
other
so.
lots, I don't see any other lots pending.
So anything that's this, SMR list, that's the only place they could put quote unquote senior housing, but they could put multi-housing other places.
now it's,
Change the name.
the new zoning is only that zone. So call it high density residential.
That's in the home app.
It's the two sides of basically the Carmel property, that's where we are with SMR. So again, it's high density, medium density, low density, that's what it is. There's one, there's the R.
Oh, is that
I think it's a farm, it looks like it again.
looks like Union Place, right?
Is that the main
Yes.
senior housing complex?
That's the farm building in the,
Union Place.
Union Place parcel. So when you see the building up the hill, that's what that is. That's the rest of the Union Place parcel.
So it's PRD.
So let's get to that first. So one thing that is a unique condition in the town is the area around the hospital. So they created a special zone for that. It's a mixed-use zone. I love it.
Does that include across the street of the barns are?
That's what it is. So
Okay,
it's-
that
And
makes
it, and it allows multifamily housing use, it allows office use, it allows medical uses associated with the hospital. Very smart thing to do. It's a logical.
Which is what this one did.
Which is what this one.
Just so everybody knows.
So this includes that housing complex as well, behind hospital too.
That's correct. Yep, it's now.
Do you need to change the description from to add in the concept of offices or something?
I would have called this hospital mixed use or something like that.
Well, but, it says hospital residential, so the Ken Carney project, which is down here, in that, right?
Yep.
That's what it is right here.
He's on this.
Okay, so that really fits, because it's hospital residential, and he doesn't do my work at hospital.
You could put an office building.
Right, across the street are all the office buildings.
He wants.
Yeah.
But you also have this on the lake.
So
If
again,
we say mixed use, doesn't that make it even more rural?
it
Yes.
does.
If it's
That's
what
what,
we want it to be?
yeah, in this case we do, because it's a very strong residential.
If somebody wanted to go in and put medical offices next to it, would you be like, yeah, that's a great idea?
Yeah, of course you would.
Because that's what they do in your hospitals.
Yeah.
They have the outlying
Yeah.
plastic surgeon, they have the outlying this surgeon.
And,
The skin guy, whatever.
right, and to go further, and if a Walgreens were there too, great, that's a retail business. So why would we prevent retail from going there as well?
So does this cover, when you say hospital residential, you can expand that to
So
say,
we'll look at it, it's,
But would you want to move it to like, smoke shops and?
so again, in that zone, we can do that. So that's why it's a separate zone, so we can do that. And you'll see when we get to talking to that, that's what they've done. Here's one my favorite, which is,
I don't even see one.
it's right there. So
there should be another one, right?
we have quote unquote trailer parks in town.
We have another one.
And Beasley, they can see Beasley. Yep.
I think it's on Kmart.
Yeah.
So,
Brooklyn Call,
right.
the one on 6N, that's that's one of the last properties.
So back in the day, that use was permissible in one of the residential zones. It went away, and now we're calling it out again as a permissible use. I keep using the phrase, zoning's aspirational, so you kind of want zoning to be where we want to be with the community. We want trailer parks. Just having the notion of a trailer park to me is totally, it runs foul of our objectives. They're legally existing right now, and they would be legally pre-existing non-conforming uses that can remain forever and ever and ever.
Just can't expand.
But you can't expand them. So right now, you can expand them. You could, if I'm a trailer park developer and I see that you have a trailer park zone, and I want to do a trailer park, I'm going to come to them and say, hey, you already got the zone. I can justify it for a lot of different reasons. You can't deny me.
Where I have 42 units now, and I could make a lot of money by doing 88.
Yeah.
But then we would have to rezone
You'd have to rezone, but I could make a really good argument. You got the zone. Why would you have a zone unless you didn't anticipate the use?
Maybe we should just remove it.
I would take that out of there as quick as anything.
And don't even make it a permitted use.
Yeah.
Just leave it as a use that's there and legal and pre-existing non-conforming, and let it
Just grandfather those two areas.
No, don't even grandfather them, they are grandfathered.
They're
You don't even have to,
By-
just
by
by nature
nature,
residential, they're pre-existing.
Okay.
Maybe expanded, yeah.
Correct.
One
How
of,
big are they? How many units?
The one on 680,
yeah,
the one over by Kmart, I say, but
What's in the car?
car wash is much smaller.
so.
When you say larger, 50 units, 50?
More, probably more than
Oh,
that.
that is this one?
Two streets that go down, and one that converges on bottom.
Correct.
Really?
It's pretty big.
See, it's pretty big.
He keeps it nice, he really does, and he upgrades them every chance he gets. He
Oh,
takes it out of that one, puts it in
It's
the
not
new one.
one, yeah.
Yeah,
You can't-
I'll
Does
give
3
you
or
the
4 a
other,
year.
I'll give you the other side of this argument, which has existed for a while, which is in dealing with the quote-unquote affordable housing issue, the town has been able to say, we have affordable housing, we have trailers. So we're dealing with that in some way or another. So that's been an argument. Now, you'll see, Lonnie's proposing affordable housing in our codes, so we don't have to use that as our argument to justify, at least we're doing something. So we'll talk about affordable housing sort of separately. So the next, now we get into our commercial zones. So this one is curious to
So
me.
we're taking this one off, right?
Yep,
Yeah, I said, all right.
that's exactly right.
Well, that's the biggest use.
Yes, sure.
There are two commercial zones that are proposed. So you know the community, we have commercial along 6 and we have commercial in Carmel. If I drive down that road, I don't make a distinction between one area of 6 and one area of another at all. It's kind of a corridor, and there's shopping centers, and then there's commercial buildings, the smaller commercial buildings. They've created two different zones. One's corridor business, one's town commercial. And if you look at the uses that Craig has plugged into, he's one step ahead of me, the uses are effectively identical. There's maybe 2 or 3
So,
differences.
Can I ask a question? Isn't the difference that you can do apartments over in one of them but not in another?
So, let's take a couple things. So number one, look at the dimensional requirements. They are absolutely identical with the exception of coverage. Same minimum lot areas, setbacks, all the way across other than coverage. Which to me, it is odd because why can you have a bigger footprint on one area of Route 6 compared to another area of Route 6? What's the reason for that? I don't get it. Then we go to uses. So if we look at uses, go ahead.
Neighborhood business?
Neighborhood business and
No, I'm talking about
Town-
car.
Town
Car-
commercial.
Town commercial, what is it?
Bob, we're talking about, car business and town commercial. So, did we jump over neighborhood?
Yes, we did. I'm sorry, we did. I'm sorry.
I thought we were talking about town excuse.
Neighborhood business. We did.
Let's skip this shit.
We did. I wanted to get to these because
It was a record meeting.
right, I want to make sure we
I'm
get,
slow, but I get it.
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure we hit the ones we need to hit. So again,
Car business and town commercial.
yeah. Now, Mike's right. Big difference is one allows apartments or above, and that's, neighborhood business, core business. No, I'm sorry, neither of them do. Hamlet mixed use is where you got the, so that's a different thing. I like, the Hamlet mixed use zone I think is great. I don't think we need to tweak that too much. It's a really well-done area. I think we've defined the Hamlet area is okay.
You're looking for a factory taxpayer,
Sorry.
factory taxpayer buildings, that we're looking for?
In that,
Upstairs, glass downstairs,
exactly right.
restructure everything you want.
That's exactly right. And I think there's universal acceptance of that.
They need parking.
Let's come back to it. I don't think, I'd like to at least touch on them quickly.
Yep. So again, neighborhood business and
Before we leave Hammond?
Yep.
3.5 stories, is that what we want?
That's like in the town of Palm now, right? They just down the basement. So what we're jumping around here, we down on Hamlet now, HMC?
let's go back to Hamlet. So that's right for conversation.
Hamlet Mixed Center, you said?
Hamlet Mixed Center HMC.
Got it.
So
So
3.5 stories,
that's
40 feet.
Carmel, that's Mayfair.
Do it again,
No,
based on that?
no, definitely agree.
This is Carmel, this is kind of thick area, and Mayfair.
Disagree, agree.
So, height is going to be the conversation. See you, Joe, thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
No.
Joe just ran out of here.
Trust the process.
Maybe skid mark.
Height is going to be the controversial issue. The 3.5 stories is a taller building, there's no question about it. And what happens when you get a little bit taller, that fourth floor, 3.5 stories of a four-story building, basically, just with a smaller footprint on the top floor. That gives you additional density, which means parking. So where does the parking go? The bigger the building, the more parking you need. Remember context. So, you know the parcels in these areas, very, very small.
So beyond just the parking, very clearly came out in the comprehensive plan, the other part, the golden
Yeah.
objectives part. Everybody wants to look like downtown Katona. 3.5 stories of floating height is not downtown Katona.
Well, I mean that the open saying 3 stories.
Yep.
Now, you go into the town of Carmel, when you go down back there, it is 4 stories in some cases, because the base is below ground, right? Yeah. Why wouldn't you change this to 3? Because everything we've been at, might go up into 6
Well,
stories.
I'm gonna do one better. Why isn't it 2.5?
So most of the time, for the buildings that you just heard described is commercial above, residential above. 1 floor of residential generally is not economically viable. Typically, you need the second floor, then it's at least 4 units, it's 6 units.
What about 1.5, about?
So, good point, 1.5. The issue with that, in order to get that on a small property, Mike, I think the half story is gonna be so small, because the building's so small. If it's a bigger building, yeah, but then you're not gonna have parking anyway. So what you're gonna see, so remember, the higher you go, it is likely you're gonna get variance requests because of the parking issue. So the developers, the model for the building is theoretically parking below ground, commercial, residential. If I'm now limited in that sense,
I'm just gonna do that.
pop me up and give me a variance for this, because I'm gonna put the parking at grade, and then the building on top of it.
So, I'm sorry, I'm stuck on this. Clear mandate from the community, we want to look like downtown Katona.
Yeah.
The goals and objectives say downtown Katona. 3.5 and 3 is not downtown Katona.
Yep.
It's just not.
Yeah.
And we're gonna end up with those horrible looking buildings, and you know what they're gonna look like, and I'm sorry, I disagree.
So this is all tied together. So part of the conversation about height and the types of buildings we could get on these sites relates to the conversation that's happened earlier about design criteria, and more importantly, form-based zoning. So personally, as a professional dealing with this, I can cope with a taller building, providing it's designed really, really well, and does reflect the character of Katona, even though it's a little bit taller.
But form-based zoning, if I remember the schedule, that's a down the road
That
thing, and
You're
that's
right.
not coming right now.
Well, that's what we need to talk about, Bob. So how do you ensure that a taller building is done correctly? Right now, there's nothing to protect that. So the instinct is to reduce the height of that building. What I'm telling you is, with form-based zoning, you could achieve that, but you gotta do it now. You can't do it 3 years from now. or 5
So
years.
here are the pictures that we bragged about,
Yep.
right? So, I guess
That's
what we
it.
call that like
2.5.
They're mostly
This is,
2.5.
this is
Yeah.
probably,
They're mostly 2.5.
Yeah, and that's a big parapet on the top that makes it look a little bit taller.
and then 2.5?
And then what's the one on the bottom there?
3.
And that's what we don't,
That's
I don't want this.
That's Ridgefield.
So
But-
why can't we make a recommendation to go to?
So you can,
2.5?
absolutely. So I just want to talk through the whole issue though. So
There's,
remember,
this is, I think, a little helpful.
yeah,
2.5,
2.5, right?
because it's under the eave.
and by the way, what half stories does, it requires peak roofs. That's how you solve those solutions, which is,
What's it require?
A peak
you get peak roofs. You don't get flat roofs, there's more character to a peak roof, it's more New Englandy looking and so
Except
forth.
they can't hide the air conditioning.
Wouldn't 2.5 instead of 3.5 help with the infrastructure, with the parking, I should say?
It does. But I'm gonna come around from the other side and be devil's advocate. We need to prime the pump.
We need to bring business in.
We're desperate to have people reinvest in these properties. So is it essential to have the third floor from an economic perspective? If I'm a developer, do I need the third floor? Or can I live with 2.5 floors? 3 is more of an incentive, there's no question about it. If I'm a developer, I'll get more money in return for my 3-story building, I get more units in it. But if it's a 2.5 story building, you're not losing that many units. You're kind of getting there. So I just want you to be aware, saying, I like the look of a 2.5-story building better, agreed, but it's less economically viable. And again, we need to prime the pump. So, to that conversation, is there a core area, for example, or a portion of the area of Mahopac or Carmel that may warrant a 3-story building compared to a 2.5-story building? Go ahead.
I don't mean to cut you off, and I
No, no.
apologize, but, so it's very interesting. I had a conversation with a guy who does commercial real estate, and we were talking about a different town, but the thing that he said, and it kind of just popped in my mind now, is, you know, if I'm a developer and I'm looking at the property as a potential to build there,
Yeah.
it's dollars and cents. I mean, he looks at it and he says, okay, if I can build 3 stories, I can put this many units in, and they want to make, this guy said, a 10% return at least. So if they're not able to do that, then they just
They're
go
done.
on to the next one.
Yep.
So are we, by going, you know, and I don't mean to knock you, but by saying 2 stories or 2.5, are we then making ourselves not attractive to developers?
That's the devil's advocate argument I'm trying to make, and I don't know the answer to that necessarily. The one thing to bear in mind is we're not, the asking price for our properties is not Katona prices. It's somewhat less than that.
So it sounds like we all agree that 3.5 is too large, so we're
And
down to
we
3
have,
or less.
and we have a parking problem.
Right, and we have
So,
a-
so now we bring it down to 3, right? So then it's between 2 to 3, but definitely not 3.5.
I
But
think,
now back to what I said before, what about the capacity on the sewer and water?
Right.
Is that gonna be
So-
a wrench that's
Right,
gonna
so
ruin
even
all this?
we place this in areas where there is sewer and water, it still doesn't mean we have sewer and water.
so
What
the-
does-
Depends on what Rich did for his calculation. If it was a half acre, say, did he figure X amount of gallons per day? How did he do it? I don't know what he did.
So are we, this is the
Limited.
point you made before, to be aspirational. Do we want to consider ourselves bound by the sewer water today?
So
Or
no,
do we
that's
want-
that's my biggest issue here is, it would be wonderful if we could say to the town board, I like the idea of some density in our hamlets. We may even give you 3 stories. However, you've got to increase the capacity of the water plants. We've got to invest in our sewer plants in order to do that. That's a capital expenditure. You've got to spend the money to do that.
That came up last night's meeting, and the board, Susie responded, there's a lot of good work going on with the sewer district, and we're close, and,
Yeah, but it's not expansion, so that's the issue. They're catching up to existing conditions. They're catching up to the deficiencies that are already existing in the systems. They're not planning for the future. So we have to align our expectations, and if the town board says, I'm never gonna spend a nickel on infrastructure improvements, we should be 2.5 stories, we should be 2 stories, and live with that. But if the town board recognizes that that's important for us to get this investment in these areas, we need to give a developer some incentive. As a result, we gotta spend some money to
So
improve those.
is there another way to come at it, which is, in the hamlets, preserve the character through 2.5 restriction, but find another place that,
Yeah, we're not
you
gonna
would
find
say-
the other place.
well, you know, they were talking about, what was it, the ocean, the ShopRite.
So that's a different story entirely. So let's put a pin in that and put that over. We're gonna have a harder time with taller buildings on the shopping center sites because they're 1-story buildings basically, than in the downtown where you're at 2-story buildings and so forth.
But what about what Bob just said? If you take a 1 or a quarter acre zone that's now, or a 1 acre zone that's now, and make it a 3 acre zone, you get that additional capacity elsewhere.
Yes, you do.
I'm sorry, I'm missing it.
So you have a 1 acre lot now that's legal, you're allowed to do. You make that a 3 acre requirement,
Which is happening.
okay? So instead of being able to build 3 houses there, you're only able to build 1 house there.
And if it's in a sewer and water district,
So now
the
you get that
capacity is.
capacity moved over to the other area that's adjacent.
So if
Well,
this was
pick
done.
your poison.
Agreed,
Yeah.
and that's.
Yeah.
So if this was done correctly, and it may have been, I just don't know, that would have been the underlying assumptions that were built into those lines, why they exist, because we expected that density to be transferred to these areas instead of that area where you've got those 1 acre lots.
I'm just stuck on, you know, I'm narrowly looking at downtown Mahopac.
Yep.
Because I see it every day. And I look at the character of the buildings, I understand 2.5, I can't get it past my craw on 3, because
Yeah.
I know what it's gonna look like.
What's
and
in
it's just too
downtown
much.
back now? Are those?
The only, it's that one above the liquor store.
Yeah, that's,
There's three, two side by side?
Well, there's that,
Three sides?
the big one above
The
the
one that
liquor
was just
store.
redone, the
Yeah,
one
yeah,
that was
yeah.
just redone is at least 3, right?
The one with the,
Yeah, well, that's 4 or 5.
the one with the cell tower on it, yes, it's 4. 4.
And is that, do you wanna see a proliferation of that size building there? It just doesn't make sense to me.
Hey, the character of the town that way.
Yeah.
too.
well, so that's the point, so.
And that's why I'd rather find a different area to accommodate that
That
type of
density,
building. Yeah.
but it would be different. So to me, our big win is to turn our downtowns, those 2 downtowns, into Katona. That's people, that's stuff going on, there's activity.
Spending money.
Then
in
it's-
the shopping
but then
center.
it's 2.5.
Then it's 2.5, which may be the case, and I'm not
okay with
opposed to,
2.5.
so am I, I'm not opposed to that at all.
So
I
it
just
would
want,
be 2.5, 35 feet?
it would be 2.5 would be 35 feet probably.
They'll never hit it, but yes.
They'll never hit it, but that,
What do you mean,
Right.
that would
When you-
accommodate,
2 is 20, say 30.
Yeah.
I mean, 25, say, just
Give it
say
to
12, but you're not.
Right.
And then the roof, you only do half the roof.
the reason you want a little bit
you're
higher
gonna
in a
hit 28.
commercial area like this is because you want big first floors.
Correct.
The first floor of a commercial space to be rentable and effective is typically 12 or 13 feet as
That's why it
opposed
says
to,
25.
You got a typical apartment.
which is why
Then a foot in
these
between with
buildings
the
are,
sound, the sound deadening and everything else.
so you want a little bit of extra.
Let's change it to 2.5 then.
And 30, or 35, it's fine.
35. Do we have the same issue with neighborhood business? I don't even see neighborhood business on here.
So that's nor do I, by the way, I couldn't find neighborhood business anywhere.
Yeah,
So that
but
was,
it's got,
that C-Corp,
you know,
neighborhood business?
nope,
NB,
it's
neighborhood
NB, I
and-
couldn't
but
find
it's
it on
got the
that.
same 3.5 and 40 feet.
Red Mills? Is that neighborhood business? Red Mills would be 0610,
Commercial business?
no?
Yeah, I thought maybe it was buried under some of these words, the colors are close, but nor did I.
But my point is, wherever they would plan on doing it, it's still not that kind of issue.
Yep, I think if we're 2.5,
Actually, it'd be slower.
yeah,
It's in
it
the
should be lower,
neighborhood.
2.5. But if we're 2.5 in these downtowns, it should be no more than 2.5 in any of those other areas, for sure.
In the neighborhood, I would say even less.
So we are, so we gotta be clear about that. It is, there is a disincentive associated with that. If I'm a random developer, you're hearing it from a guy who wants to do.
I can't say no, I'm just, people scroll through your websites and go bang, bang, boom. No? Okay, where's Ulster County?
Yeah.
What the hell's Orange County?
Yeah, but these are already developed areas.
I understand.
mean,
I understand.
I just
You ran out of room.
Building
I'm
new,
not-
building
ran
new.
out of room. I'm
You
sorry.
ran out of room and I'm not.
Yeah.
But building new, you would want 3, right?
I don't ask you, and I'll tell you what, if
So-
you could make the whole, I'm sorry.
No, no,
If you could make that lot even at 3 with a nice parapet, it's a hell of a look. It looks bigger. And maybe that's what we're going for. I don't know if I want to
It's a
kill
good
3 off
discussion.
the bat.
It's a good discussion.
Just for parking, but here's the issue. That parking's an issue at 2.5.
right, yeah, that's for sure.
If you got 12 units, you need 24 parking spots,
24.
Wow.
plus the commercial.
Right, plus your storefront.
Oh my God.
Right.
So the only way you do that is putting that underneath. Now your building's getting taller. And I will say,
Wow.
the existing renovations of those buildings, not gonna be a problem. It'd be nice if people do that, I don't know. What we're looking for is somebody to come in, a new guy, a developer. In order to do that, he's tearing down a building,
But he's gonna want
3 stories.
He's gonna want 2.
I'll tell you, that's,
And
that's,
you want parking underneath.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody in the fire department, I actually moved here. What do they think about that?
They haven't said anything yet. They were involved for a while.
Do we do standpipe around here at all, or no? Is that all just hose for top floors?
Oh, they're gonna put sprinklers in if they're doing this size
Well,
building.
these days you put sprinklers
Yeah.
in, for the fire department, you put standpipe.
but there'll be standpipes in the parking garage, there'll be sprinklers in the building.
That's another point.
Can we
which is
table, just to move on, can we table between 2.5 and 3 stories so we can discuss it with the town?
But just one other point, sorry, Craig, remember when we had this issue when we had the low-income place or whatever, the mixed-use place in with the fire department, and they had to get new equipment,
Yes. Yeah.
and that was
Yeah.
another cost, so that's something.
That was a 3-story. if I
But all the
remember
towns.
correctly.
That was 3-story.
We've been to several town meetings, and the town board has nodded their head yes for 3-story buildings. When we showed some 4 stories, they were too high. So let's just table, so we got a lot to cover, for 2.5 to 3 to be discussed with the town board.
And remember, we're not solving the problem, we're just raising the point.
So are developers clamoring to get here, and that's why
No.
we're making this
That's
So
the
what are we-
problem.
So we're gonna change all this, then we're gonna advertise and say, hey, we're open for businesses, this is what we have.
Once the-
How are we gonna attract people here?
Hopefully.
It'll be on the zoning code, on our webpage, and then people will look at the zoning
Well,
code and then contact
And I
us.
think hopefully some of our builders that we know, that do business now, that we know in town, like, Ken Carney's developing things, if he, all right, I'm gonna give this a try.
The
And
way,
if
the way
he or
this
she
is
does,
worked, so all over the all over Westchester County, parts of Putnam County, Orange County, the same formula's been used. It's, what happened, I'll give you my story. So, traditional development patterns in our area followed the train lines, there were hamlet centers.
Beacon, Beacon.
Exactly right. That's how these areas developed in the post-World War II, suburbs showed up, and we sprawled out all over the place. Problem, we've been spending 50 years fixing the problems of the last half of the last century. We're going back to revisiting our downtowns. That's where people want to be, that's where our kids want to be. It's fun, it's exciting, and there's lots of stuff to do. So reinventing all of these downtown centers. That works. It's a formula that's working everywhere. We don't have train stations in our downtowns, but we still have the downtowns that are sort of traditional and expected. If we get a pioneer to find us, they show up. It's happened everywhere. And what normally happens, and I've been involved in this in a lot of places, is you do this with a pioneer. So you have a partner, a developer that's saying, I need 3 stories. If you give me 3 stories, I'm gonna buy that corner lot and build it. We don't have,
Like the person you spoke to.
right, but we don't have those pioneers in our downtowns right now. We have them on a couple of corners of the town, but not in the downtowns. That's how this happens, Vicky, and it just takes one guy,
Yeah.
because the community's very close-knit. As soon as you realize somebody's making money in a community, everybody shows up. It is instantaneous, but it takes the pioneer. So one of the things we should have been doing from the beginning of this process is cultivating a pioneer, so that he becomes a partner with this process, and he sort of believes we're giving him what he wants through our zoning that we're creating, kind of for you, Bob, or, Joe, the developer, and he believes he's got a stake in this process, so he's got to invest, even if he's gonna lose a nickel and not make all the money he wanted to. It's only an 8% return instead of a 10% return. He's gonna do it because he was part of the process. That was another problem with the process. We didn't engage that pioneer. Not too late to do it, but I think that's one of the critical things. It's not the kind of thing, we don't put it on the front page of the paper and say, hey, come to Carmel.
Right.
We've been doing that for 50 years and nobody shows up. So it's a difficult thing.
Or they do show up and then they get kicked out because nobody wants development here. You can't win
That's the other
on
thing,
the
too.
other side.
Well, we're gonna have to try to change that.
Yeah, and that I think is part of the task of this comprehensive plan.
So neighborhood business, we're gonna, how do we respond to that? Where is it?
So where is it? That was my only comment on neighborhood business.
Not one end.
So,
And should it have those dimensions?
and should it have those dimensions? That's right.
color is it, if you don't mind me asking?
They're so
It's like
close.
a pinkish
pink.
color.
Yeah,
Could that be it?
it's got no designation, but that's CB. It seems to be the same CB. I don't know.
guessing. What about that thing?
Oh, there it is.
We don't know.
You think that's it?
No, is that hospital or?
No, the hospital's
No,
over here.
hospitals are.
All right, so, yeah, that's
No,
the
wait.
color.
It
No.
is a different, yeah, then,
That's
That's
all.
Lemcar.
Yeah.
That could be it.
Yeah.
That could be neighborhood business, like, car.
Is that Lemcar?
But what?
6 and no, we're not
No.
Lemcar.
No.
Where's 6? I'm upside down,
This is
sorry
6.
guys.
6 would be here.
So here's Pierce Place.
You're upside down,
I know, it's throwing me off there.
So the comment for
Post
that is,
office would be, I think, over here, right? Because this is,
So that's
what's his
Lemcar right
face's
there.
property that comes out to 6, so the
Okay.
post office should be.
that's exactly right.
Lemcar's
The
right
senior
there.
center's right there.
Well, if it's neighborhood business, there should be either several neighborhood businesses, whether it's Red Mills.
So
or
neighborhood, so
Secor or none. I mean, like.
neighborhood
where
business
are
is typically in a residential area on the corner where there's the deli, the gas station, and
Well, there's-
2 or 3
Red
commercial
Mills,
businesses.
Secor.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And they talk about,
Seems like there's less of a case to be made for large, tall buildings.
Correct.
oh, for sure, those are
Okay.
2
Right by
stories
houses,
max.
They should be small.
So,
The next thing I wanted to jump to is just town center and commercial business. So why are there 2 different zones? As you see, identical dimensional requirements, virtually identical use requirements. So why was there a necessity to create 2 different zones? You see them butting up against one another, all on Route 6. And until you get to the Hamlet Center. So I'm not sure why. There's not a significant
TC,
distinction
town.
between the two?
Town commercial TC, so we should have town
Is
commercial.
it the permitted
all over the
uses?
place, right?
That's here.
So the uses are essentially the same. Again, look at them.
One doesn't allow commercial over, nothing like that?
Nope.
I mean, residential over commercial?
There's no residential use allowed, these are all commercial
We're
zones,
comparing to corridor business,
CB and TC.
so the last column is
That's the only
different.
difference, yeah.
And what's the last column?
Maximum permitted
Lot,
lot
one is
coverage.
And it's a
45.
5% difference, from
Right.
45 to 50%, that's imperceptible.
Yeah.
To me, again, I don't get
So
it.
this here,
Town center,
uh,
town center. Yeah, so I'm not so, my point
This
is,
is a bunch.
it seems to me this wants to be one zone, not two zones. I don't see the reason for two zones. So that's simply the question I would ask, why two zones?
I agree.
So this is the first column here, principal permitted uses, that's what they're saying can be on those, that's not
Yes.
what's there now?
Right, so there's 17 permitted principal uses in CB, and there's 16 in TC, and they're.
And what's the next one, accessory?
You
The
can,
next one is special
you
permit
can have a-
uses.
you can have a funeral and,
Yeah, but you can't have one in the town center,
Right,
but you can have one in the
but why?
corridor
you
business.
could
What's,
die trying.
Exactly.
that's very good. But what's the difference? Why there, why there? Exactly, we should end on
Research
that one.
laboratories, no research laboratory,
Yeah.
Look, they buttress up against each other
yeah.
more than half the time. It makes sense to amalgamate.
Yeah.
Yep.
That was a big word. I'm sorry. Thanks.
So then,
Plan recreation.
so this is Union Place. So planned recreation is basically agricultural uses and museums and riding academies. It's not a very economically,
This should be revenue generating. I
It's-
mean, it's our,
That was our light industrial zone.
it was, so that's odd to me.
One,
Commerce business
and with all, I know, we have a lot of parks around here. We have I mean, Jim Gilchrist, if he's watching, forgive me, but we have a lot of parks around here. We really want we want things to generate some revenue for the town, lower the taxes for the town.
What is
No?
this now?
Farm.
It's a farm. It's
Mayfair
vacant
Farm.
land.
No, I know, I'm saying
Commerce
zoning.
Business Park.
But but when we had that proposed use for it,
Union Place.
Union Place, we had a lot of residential objection to
Traffic
changing the-
on
yeah,
that road,
Yeah.
Yep. which, by the way, the applicant found different access routes on Route 6. The applicant worked with DOT to create improvements on Route 6 to accommodate that. That was one of the few instances where we had a developer saying, I can do things in the community. What this is doing is saying you can't do anything on your property.
This is, we talked about this, we all talked about this a lot, when we had that scare with that development, we kept saying, hey, this is a gateway into our community, we get one chance to do it right, so we should zone that, whatever we think is right.
Right. Yeah.
Right, I mean,
But what-
it leaves
but
so
what
much,
is- What is our vision for this?
that's why I said, I don't know the answer, what's right there, but
Because
it's
there's no
not,
sewer,
there's no sewer.
so that everything would be septic there.
But the Union Place plan was bringing sewer up from Somers.
Yeah, but someone said no.
Somers, but that was then, now is now. Somers has a ton of
So
additional.
we should zone it right.
This is one where
regardless,
the
right?
notion of being aspirational to me makes sense. That's restrictive.
I don't like the plan recreation.
And again, there aren't many places where something like a large-scale development can occur. That's one of them. It's not gonna happen anywhere else.
But why
So if
Not
this,
sure why
so
not.
if this became, I'm just spitballing here.
Yeah.
3.5, the original thing that we were hung up on. What was it?
I don't think I'd wanna go there as a single-family residential zone. I mean,
No.
yeah,
Oh, so if we were gonna do a mixed use?
yeah.
You're saying that would not?
No, I'm
fit in?
saying that would be
That'd
a
be good for
logical
mixed
thing
use.
to do.
Okay.
The frontage along Route 6 could have the commercial areas, the area in the back could have
Farm
townhouses.
areas is
And the
beautiful.
point I'm making is, it's big enough that if you went to 3.5 stories.
In my interior,
In the interior would not be, maybe his objection.
I think you're right, and I think Union Place may have been 3 stories, I don't remember now.
Some of them are pretty tall, I remember along that Main Street.
Yeah,
So we all agree, I think, that we don't want plan recreation, right? So,
Either spot though, I don't think,
I
because
don't
that's,
even know what that is.
that's the spot where they were gonna do the ball fields originally years ago, park, whatever, not park, sportsplex.
Oh, yeah.
And, I mean, it's wet, there's a lot of
Yeah,
wetlands
yeah,
in there,
no.
but but still, I mean, nobody has mentioned a sportsplex there in 15 years.
Yep.
Pat, maybe?
Yep.
So what do we think would be good, would a business park be good there?
So
That's what it is currently.
Yeah.
What are the permitted uses for this property now?
All the light industrial uses.
Yeah, it's-
Senior housing,
Let's go back to
handling
the-
materials,
what did it
all
used to
that.
be?
The old days.
What did it used to be?
Right there, you're over it.
Yep,
What is that?
Commercial, light industrial.
yes,
All light industrial.
that
zone.
gray area was the light
What is
industrial.
that? You don't,
That's the straight, that's the bigger lots, the 3-acre lots with the heavier
There's
use.
250 acres.
IBM was trying to go there
I
one
think
time.
it's this one here.
It is.
It is.
I'm
Not
not,
that, this, and
I'm
this.
just saying,
The same?
industrial
Yeah.
versus mixed use.
So remember, what this was,
What about-
In other words,
This was a-
industrial implies you're taking
It
a
does.
farm area and a neighborhood residential
and
area,
you're putting a warehouse.
and you're putting warehouses.
Yep.
Versus you're building retail on the bottom and apartments on the top, and it's big enough that it could go to 3.5 stories. That's what I'm saying.
So, and that's the reality of the situation right now. What's happening on old industrial sites, underutilized office parks, underutilized shopping centers, is that's the model that's being built on, the mixed uses. They're taller, some taller residential buildings with mixed uses and commercial space in them. That would,
I was in a place in Austin, Texas once like that. It was just, you walk everywhere. In that location, you would leave there, go down to Bobo's, you'd go across the street to McDonald's, you would go across the street to the liquor store,
Bank
across
at
the
the-
street to the
right up
bank,
front.
ShopRite.
to get into the weeds, if we create that little community here, I'm not investing in the hamlet, I'm investing over there. So now we're detracting from the hamlet theoretically, but that's the next problem to
But I
worry
can
about.
see, you know, we keep talking about who, the Pioneer, that's a nice Pioneer spot.
I totally agree, and it takes the first guy
So
to do
let's-
it.
But also then, I mean, the old adage, if you build it, they'll come. I mean, if this gets developed and developed nice, then all of a sudden this becomes
That's
more attractive.
100% right.
Good point. So let's get rid of this, planned recreation
Yeah, it's just,
destination. They can go to, you know, the other, like, the other parks around here.
yep.
Mike?
And
I
then,
mean,
the-
it's just,
I didn't understand why that would be a
okay.
parkland.
and then the last zone is the business park zone. That's BP, yep, the dark purple zone. So,
So, that's from
So,
southeast.
Can I just
Go ahead.
go back one
Yeah.
step? So what we're kind of leading to is if we get rid of the PRD, you would want something that is more expansive in height than these.
Yes.
With the way we're.
yeah, and I think we would be clever about how we do it, so you get a height bonus if you do this, if it's set back, if it's screened,
Yeah,
whatever it is.
I think what we have to be careful of is, we did the, I think, we drive by there now, those banks still look nice that we did on Route 6.
Yeah, beautiful.
So this is gonna be something, an architectural gem for us, it's gotta have some curb appeal, just like this property when we come in from southeast, southeast, right? We don't want, you know, to look like old Route 6 with the dump trucks and the gravel pits and everything like that. So this needs to have a lot of curb appeal, welcome, you're driving from Somers in, it's gotta look good. You know, when you're driving to some of these nice towns, it just, you're driving your car, you know you're in a new town.
The Elephant Hotel.
Yeah, you just feel
the
something.
history.
Let me give you another example. Wegmans down in Harrison or whatever. First time you go in there, other than the Wegmans itself, you go, wow, and you look around. And you make that once, and then you tell your neighbor, have you seen that new place? And they go, and that's. the
So much
facility.
buzz from that. So those were 3 essentially vacant office buildings.
Yeah.
Where Wegmans is now?
Yeah.
So this is our one entrance to the community. This is our other entrance to the
Yep.
community. What are we gonna do here?
So right now,
And
the
here's the
business
other
park
one.
zone, if you look at the permitted uses, are the same
Do that
zone,
one next.
are the same uses that have been there historically on property that's still undeveloped to this day. Light industry, wholesale warehouse, research laboratory, data processing and computer centers. If those uses were viable, they'd be there by now. We're never gonna get a large-scale wholesale business.
Chip place that's making chips for computers.
Well, that's two different things with respect to that. So even the light industry, the sort of warehouse uses kind of thing, where's the exit to 684?
Right.
It's too far. It'll never come here. It's just logical at $5.50 a gallon for diesel fuel.
Yeah.
It's an extra 5 miles. The
That's a
cost
long
doesn't.
haul. That's not an easy drive.
It's-
Tough haul.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Those roads.
And we
not a
don't
road.
want want that in our Gateway, that's the name of this complex, right? We don't want that, we don't want that on our road front. You know,
So the other thing that I think that they've tried to install is saying, well, what about these high-tech biomedical uses and those types of Regeneron kind of uses? And that's why I included that image in the material I sent you today. Marvelous, would be wonderful if that's the case. The Hudson Valley has become a hub for that, no question about it, but they cluster. They want to be around one another because the scientists go back and forth and there's synergy.
And by a parkway.
So, and, well, it's less access, but what it is, the key for them, and again, I've been involved with Regeneron's reuse and all those other ones, the North 60 next to the Westchester County Medical Center, housing. That's their key. So, as I showed you in that map, they're clustered everywhere else. There's really nothing near us. In order for them to come here, they might, if there is housing, and it's different housing. It's not single-family homes on 3-acre lots. It's apartments. These are people that work 24 hours a day. I mean, literally, and then they just go and crash and come back. They're used to living in dorms. They're all PhDs, have a lot of money, but they're curing cancer. These are they're remarkable people. So if this area were surrounded by that type of housing, maybe then there's a reason to build my next stage,
the Fishkill plant, which has the IBM plant, that has thousands of acres. They all come into there because they all use, and there's housing, there's apartments, there's hotels, everything off Route 9.
Yeah.
You may get that here, though, because of what is here.
So you could. So that's the point of, I keep using that word aspirational. So I don't want to say no to that, but I want everyone to be realistic. So if that's the only thing you could do up here, it's never going to happen because there is no housing that's proximate to that. Mike's got a great point down there in the new zone we create for there. Include that use. I think that's a terrific
Because
option.
if not our town,
You get
the next town down, they have housing that's.
You can set it back up on the hill a little bit too, maybe,
And by the way, that's the cleverest thing in the world. You drill your oil well on your property line, so you suck your neighbor's oil. You build your rateable in our community, and all the school kids go to some other community or so forth. So they pay the price, we get the benefit.
Somers does.
Yeah. Yeah, but, so the point is, great location.
So this down here is not Mayback School District?
I don't think it is.
He's saying that the kids lived in the
Oh,
Somers.
where those new
Oh,
buildings,
oh,
Somers,
gotcha.
they're paying their.
I think
That's what I meant.
So, what are we gonna zone this?
So I think it's, to me, it's again, a mixed-use zone. The market today is residential uses. That's what the developers are building, but they need to do it in context of some commercial uses. It's mixed uses. That's what's happening these days.
And we need to tie one to the other.
And we need to tie one to the other.
So they can't get the CO on the residential till they have the percent of the commercial.
Like we do
done.
with open space today.
Correct.
So that's a perfect area to accommodate those sort of mixed uses. We've had investment in senior housing there, but again, we've had mixed results in senior housing. But all those other uses that are permissible on those properties, what's his name's not building an industrial building.
We don't want industrial, we have the old Route 6, which is pretty industrial.
Yeah.
Hidden,
Right.
and it's
they
still
all
on
fit
eyesore. We don't want industrial on our Route 6 corridor coming into our town.
The frontage along Route 6 should be higher-end uses, like
Yeah.
the banks we did on Route 6 down the other
And
property.
if you put industrial here, who's gonna go up to $500,000 condo up
Yeah,
here? You're not
right,
gonna do
exactly
it.
right.
You really,
It's a disincentive in many ways.
this should be welcoming, just like this should be welcoming. Just like Mike said over here should be welcoming.
What are they putting on that spot that's across from the Lutheran church there on 6? It was supposed to be a hotel, and then it wasn't. And now there's all construction vehicles there. Do we know what's going on?
At the moment, they're doing the roadway. The
Okay.
roadway's going in for
one
the
is this?
subdivision, Gateway Fairway.
The GNF that you just granted the extension for.
So they're doing the subdivision at the moment. Once they do that, they're gonna start with the senior and the affordable housing aspect is affordable.
Yep.
Outdoor, multifamily. And then they're gonna work on getting some other uses in there.
And that's what the zoning is we're talking about right now.
We had the
So-
hotels calling up, asking
I
questions,
was
and
gonna
then
say,
they
so
went
no
away.
hotel.
So
No, they called, and then, you know what happened to Mark?
Well,
It wasn't so great.
Kamada sell the property to a hotel chain? Doesn't a hotel chain own
I
it?
think they did, or do. So there's still the potential of a hotel there. I think that would be great.
But the
And then the
hotel
memory
again-
care center came at the same spot. They were gonna do that down at the bottom.
They did.
So-
So
So if somebody does that type of development, memory care, for example, is that a different tax base for us than?
It is. Yeah, it is, but it's also commercial use. So, number one, it's taxed differently from our perspective. It's taxed as a commercial property.
When we want that near the hospital?
How many kids go to school from there?
Yeah, none.
None.
So there's no, so the service costs for that are low, but the EMS costs, fire
Correct.
costs are very high.
Yeah.
The emergency service people are there multiple times a day in any of these facilities.
So then why wouldn't it be around in a hospital?
Yeah,
That's a perfect spot.
yep, that is a perfect spot. And those are uses that are actively looking to be in lots of different places, especially where the population are. We have population here, we have people, we don't have much of anything else, but we have people. So, yeah,
And the one on Seminary is in front of me right now with they dropped off plans, so. The memory care facility in front of Paladin.
So this is that's gonna come soon, or they're gonna start working?
What happened to the distillery that was coming? Is that no longer coming?
It is still apparently coming on a smaller scale.
so that's a great example. Another component of the plan was tourism. That's what we have to accommodate in our community. So the comments that I tried to put in our response was, we're not creating new there's no new Grand Canyons in town. So the tourist locations exist, it's the lakes. That's what really drives tourism in some ways in the community. The only other way is creating facilities like the distillery. Alexandria would have been a tourist
Breweries,
attraction.
things like that.
Absolutely right. So, yeah, we should attract those things, but there's no, unless we
Where?
build them, that's the point.
Yeah.
So,
You don't put it next to somebody's house on Barrett Hill Road, you don't.
there you go. There you
But you know
go.
what I'm saying, that's the issue, and
Yeah,
that's,
nobody wants it next to it.
So saying our savior is gonna be tourism, it's really not gonna be tourism.
No.
The tourism is kind of what it is today.
So Pat, just breweries, only because
Yeah.
it's on my tongue. What do we have to do to attract that type of business?
A
Because
brewery,
it
you
seems
say?
like a natural for the town. It's what we consume. It doesn't seem to require to be in the most beautiful spot.
Yeah.
It's just gotta be good food, good vibes,
We have good
and
water.
beer.
and a big room.
That's right.
So
Yeah,
what do
you
we
need
have to
big
do to
space.
get that?
So it's a tricky thing. So I can use the equation, the example of the wineries on the east end of Long Island. 30 years ago, a guy planted some vines. And now if you go out there today, it's buses from the city bringing hundreds of people out. And there's dozens of wineries. And I said in some of our comments, that can work here. Again, it takes a pioneer. We can create this aspirational zoning, but it takes the guy who wants to do that. So the winery is actually a great example, because all the money those wineries make isn't necessarily in the wine. They make money making wine. It's the tourism that comes there. So we can have a winery that sells grapes for jelly. Doesn't matter, but the winery that's in the middle of it has weddings, and
Yeah.
people go there all day long, and it's an exciting place to be. It's a destination. You're creating those tourist
And
destinations.
again, where?
So that's the point. So
But,
breweries are great.
Breweries
breweries are great because
You
you
just buy
don't
your
need,
product.
but they sell food, they have
Yeah,
a
it's the
menu,
same thing.
and it doesn't have to be in a fancy
It doesn't.
location.
Correct, but they don't have to grow the grape, is what
No,
I'm
no,
saying.
no, no.
Yeah,
They buy the hops, they buy the
Everything
barley, they
They
buy the
do
wheat,
what they
you
do,
know.
but to
They
attract them,
find, and
is
normally,
it a tax incentive to get them here?
so we don't have the ability to necessarily do that.
IDA?
The IDA, the county IDA can do that.
Wasn't there years ago, I mean, this is going back years ago, wasn't Schlitz Brewery building something in Putnam County,
Yeah,
and the town turned it down?
because it was an industrial use. It wasn't the brewery Bob's talking
Yeah,
about. It was
I'm talking about a blue pub.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
but, yeah, but I remember, I wasn't here at the time.
It was a
but
factory use, so
It was
it was,
supposed to be a
Have tenant-
brewery here, yeah.
Wouldn't that be nice?
So
Yeah, but if brew pub, I mean,
yep.
aren't you going back to the issue then of, do we have the
What do
water
you say we're
to
doing with this?
supply?
How are we gonna zone?
We're gonna create
taking
something
that
that,
out.
right,
Just playing devil's
we're
advocate.
getting rid of
I
that
mean, I
zone,
love it. I
number
think
one.
it's a
So
great
we're
idea.
replacing it with a
Mixed
more of a
use,
mixed
wasn't it
use
mixed
zone.
use? Yeah.
Yep.
Correct.
So I think
I
the
went to a
same,
nice one up
the
in
same argument holds
Massachusetts,
true for BP,
I was up
Yeah.
there
which
with
is
my nephew.
creating some,
Beautiful little.
including residential use.
Are there-
And whether we wanna
Are there,
back away
are
from
there
some of the
areas
industrial
that
uses.
have less of a water
It
problem?
doesn't-
If we're gonna have mixed use up top, we got
Well, the distillery
$500,000 condos up top.
That's what I wanted, so that's the point I forgot to say before. The uses that Mike's now issuing building permits for are residential uses in this area. Do we want an industrial use next to those?
No.
It's gonna detract from them, the value's going to go
Mike can't be
down.
building, Mike can't be building $500,000 condos up here and have industrial use there.
Yeah.
You're not gonna drive through
But if it was a brew pub, like we were saying before.
That's different.
That's
Or
different.
a,
Bobo's right there.
Yep.
Starbucks right there, whatever it is.
you know, that's.
So what's that, so when we say brew pub, it would attract people. And then you go up there,
And then they go to the
what
golf
would that be
course.
zoned?
And then there's pizza parlors.
Sure.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
then they go
Exactly.
to the golf course across the way, leave the
Yeah.
golf course, come there for a beer, and then go, you know.
Yeah, people go to Putnam, and then they stop into Red Mills.
That's right, so there's an area where you
McDonald's,
could create
beer,
that,
you know.
that tourism
Yeah.
niche by
Hamburger, no.
adding those uses in this particular area. You golf, you go to the group, yeah.
You got something.
But if you had because this isn't an attractive industrial area, so an industrial guy shows up tomorrow, he's not gonna be the highest and best industrial guy, he's gonna be a crappy industrial
Right, you
user.
don't want those.
And that's what could conceivably go there, that's a negative.
So how do we
Prevent
deal
that.
with middle of the
It's,
road?
it's,
The zoning table, yeah, put it as a permitted use.
that's the key,
Limit the permitted uses.
that's the
We
key.
have a lot of, that one building lot back in Old Route 6 is subdivided into 6 different lots or something like that.
Yeah.
But the industrial back there.
Or not, so, I'm not worried about industrial, again, maybe this notion of high-tech biomed uses show up, a clean, research building in the back, an
Silarex.
IBM kind of building.
Yeah, Solar Act, yeah.
Silarex
Yeah,
is
yeah.
perfect, I mean, it's. they're
That
good
doesn't
neighbors.
bother anybody.
They have to filter their waste, but other than that, they're good.
But a warehouse that's gonna be rented by half a bunch of landscapers and some contractors and there's crap all over the yard,
No.
that's,
So this would be neighborhood business?
I don't think it would be neighborhood business, again, I
No,
think
not
it's so
a neighborhood, it's
unique.
more-
I'm envisioning this and that as something different, another zone, call it whatever we wanna
Gateway
call it.
zone.
Gateways,
It's a gateway, we keep saying that.
I love it.
One of the notes I was writing down the other day, the whole, it's actually the theme that we should wanna do, right, is, as a plan board, I think we need some speed, right? So we zone this properly, we'll get some speed. We make it, very expensive, of course, expensive for, who was the guy, Albano, was saying about, he gave his daughter property, and she spent, I don't know, lots of thousands of dollars in fees and zoning
Yeah,
and
yeah,
time.
yeah.
She pulled up and moved somewhere else with a free piece of property, right? So I think if we zone this right, it'll help with speed, it'll help with cost, and it'll help with ease of doing business.
Yep.
Those are the, I don't know.
I
The
think,
frustrating part of our speed problem is usually the East Hudson issue, but yes, agreed,
Why is that such a big deal?
because they have their hand on everything that anybody does.
so you hear Rich commenting all the time about, it's not my review, DEP has to review it.
Okay,
So
it's
it's
the
out of
DEP.
our hand, it's not a local decision anymore, other agencies get involved.
When
That's
the
what's
MOA
so
was
bizarre.
signed, we had to
Yep.
curtail to this agreement that we would do all these
And the
additional things.
DEP, and we signed on to this with this agreement, they have a different perspective. They're not, they want to say no. That's
Yeah.
their intent. When their reviewers look at plans, they're finding ways to say no.
See, these lots are all labeled MOA.
Yeah.
That's from the memorandum of agreement that was signed. They bought lands that were subdividable and said, now nothing will go there.
So they just.
So they use their money
tied
to
it
do
up, right?
things, but that's part of the agreement that was involved, correct?
And that's another thing, by the way, just as an aside. So there's a few of these other little zones
Yes,
that
conservation.
they've been called out as special zones. So the DEP, as you know, continues to buy land. So we're zoning areas for DEP.
See,
So we're zoning that property. If DEP acquires this piece next week, do we have to amend our zoning code? It's a question on the logistics of how they propose this. So,
because this isn't really a zone, it's really a restriction on a lot.
yeah,
So it should be, technically, it should be this.
but it's not.
Just with
so-
the restrictions, it's a deed restriction, they can't build on it.
Right, but they've created it as a separate zone. So now every time they buy the property, we would theoretically have to rezone the map to do this. I don't
What
want
is
to do
he
that.
over there, you know, conservation?
Conservation.
Conservation
Yeah.
and
So
recreation.
we're saying, get rid of the conservation.
I don't know, because again, that memorandum is a 150-page legal document that perhaps you can look at, not me. But there's all sorts of
I do
limitations.
not.
in it.
I think we have to be careful too, I know I'm changing subjects here, but when we go through this, there's several items that I think were being passed to the planning board. One was historic review, which personally I'm totally against, because when we were doing the cell tower, we had those artifacts or whatever, and the applicant had to go work with, I think it was the state or
Yeah.
somebody,
New York
SHPO.
State,
Yeah,
yeah.
SHPO.
and I think that worked very well. But I don't think that should come on to us. Let the applicant,
personally leave that on the applicant,
Good.
right? You guys,
Yep.
what do we know about historical, we took on the architectural review, which is a lot.
Correct, so part of seeker, they have to identify any of these things that are on their property.
That's
It turned out on the one, what was that subdivision, Yankee?
Yankee Development. Yeah.
They didn't know about one in the back, or they didn't note it. So the guy who bought the land on Union Valley Road, which butts to this,
Yeah.
had somebody come out, and as they were walking, they're like, oh, and here's another one, oh, and there's another one, oh, and your neighbor has 2 more, and brought it to our attention, and that's how it
That's
came
up
out.
But I think how we resolved with that,
We made him resolve it.
Through-
Yankee had to go through
Right.
HIPAA, or whatever it's called, nice.
So
I think that worked well.
what I'll tell you is that our New York State Historic Preservation Office is excellent. They do a wonderful job of protecting the state's historic resources. It's an automated system online. It works great. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. We don't have to assume that.
Right?
Yeah.
It's under seeker, so it's
Yeah.
something that you
So
don't.
I just, that was just some of my notes,
So what I'll do is I'll summarize our thoughts with respect to this, add it to our memorandum. So look at that memorandum, make sure the tone, more than anything else, the tone. So
It's a 20-page memorandum, so
I'm not,
I've gone through
I
it.
don't want to piss off our consultants. They've done a good job. Most of the commentary you see is just, I'm not sure why it was done a certain way. So it's really clarifications. There may be great answers for everything that we have questions about. It's just unclear to me at this point because we weren't part of that process. So the tone of it was important to me, not to be critical of them, because again, they may have done a really, really good job.
Would it make sense, when this is all said and done and the document is issued, that maybe you sit down with the consultant and walk through, after they have a
So,
chance to read it? and walk
That's
through?
what I hope happens here is we produce now, it'll be a 50-page memo probably with a map and question marks in a lot of
We
different
didn't get
areas.
to the code yet.
And then, and we haven't gotten to the code yet, and then we're gonna sit down with them and
Yeah.
go through all of this. This should be cooperative.
Yeah.
We should have been cooperating with them early, that's the problem. We were coming into this at the very end of the process.
So, Mike, Pat, the code, is that when we get that, like, meetings like.
So that's the last piece of
Is that
this.
when we, all the people that get up and speak about docs and.
Yes,
and,
that's where it is.
That's when we start saying, okay. yeah,
Right.
okay.
So that's gonna be difficult. So again, Bob, to your point earlier, I think we have to go through that page by page, and we can do that at our special meeting on the 30th. A lot of those pages we just flip through. We don't,
And we can do that in, as you're suggesting, with a cooperative tone. I mean, we don't have to be
100%.
belligerent about it, we just say, have you considered the
Right.
fact that this, that, and the other thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's what a consultant does.
Yeah.
They
Right.
come and consult and give you ideas of what you
Yeah.
think they think you should do. They're not telling you you have to do it.
Exactly.
And I'm pushing for nothing, I talked to Rose yesterday, today, whatever, and I said to her, if possible, leave the November 30th meeting just for that.
Yep.
Now, if something hot comes up on the agenda that,
Of course.
you need to do business, we'll do it.
Yeah,
Otherwise, if we start 7 o'clock sharp,
I think we need it just to focus on that.
You'll be tired by 10.
yeah.
No question.
I went to all 6 of those classes, I was tired the whole time. He was not as handsome or smart as you.
It's not a fun read.
That's right. Heavy play.
It's not a
It
fun
is.
read. It's,
And that's why I think a lot of it, Mike and I will be able to say, you guys don't have to worry about that, we'll take care of those particular issues. There's not a policy issue embedded in it, but a lot of it there is.
like the uses on Route 6, some of them you're not gonna care about.
Right.
They're there. It's similar to what's already there. You're not gonna, try to reinvent the wheel on certain things, but some things you're gonna have a lot of input.
But to Craig, your point earlier, special permit uses that come to you, something, currently they go to the zoning board, the town board, some things come to you, they're switching responsibilities for a lot of those things in the code, so you need to know what's coming your way.
Are you satisfied with what we got tonight? Is this?
I got enough for this, and I think we clearly covered the basic issues with respect to the map, so again, I'll put that into hopefully what is your language in this memorandum, and I'll get that back to you before
And if
our
you're not
next meeting.
comfortable with the language, just tell me, you can change it.
Yeah, no, I
Absolutely.
spent some time on the phone today,
Yep.
going through my, Pat gave me a preliminary draft.
It's just important to know that it's not,
Yep.
it's your document, so anything that you guys add or delete is
Absolutely.
perfectly fine.
Absolutely. And again, in going through this material, some of it does get in the weeds, so Mike's phone number, reach out, we can help you understand.
I just gotta, I couldn't help but notice it, so the C areas, I mean, the vast majority, there's nothing in. But in this one C area over here, you have lots.
Yeah,
Yeah, but this is a floodplain.
Oh, so that's why it's a C? Okay.
It was in the FEMA flood maps here too, actually. If you look right here, you're gonna see it on the 82 map, see?
that's
Comes
one of the
right through.
overlays. Yep,
There's lots here. That's Guymer, Parker.
yep.
Okay.
They're there. It's just, this is a floodplain that runs through. So you
So-
see it runs
And-
through,
and
it runs
there's-
through.
To Mike, where Mike started the evening with, right now, regulated by FEMA and flood control regulations.
And you.
What Mike was raising earlier is the code would then say, and you're deducting that from your property. It's already controlled and protected through the FEMA regulations. So now it's another layer of control and a punitive one that eliminates development potential on your property.
Code specifically said if you wanted to build on these lots over here, planning board approval. To build a house.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the house has to be
That's strict
above
for
the
our
base
town.
flood elevation and mitigating the flood impacts.
Your first floor has to be 3 feet above ABF. E.
So that's in the, that's right. So, thank you,
Good.
everybody.
Thank you, great, good job.
Yeah,
Do
thanks.
we have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion. I second.
Okay.
Not
Motion
bad,
by
right?
Vicky, seconded by, do we, thanks for being so prepared.
Take me back.